When you say forever home or the families, if they don't get, have you ever had that situation where the kids never got to live with their families back again, but haven't had the foster family either?
Sense of belonging that kids feel.
Yeah.
Like I was just reading this book about this famous neurosurgeon about his life. His name is Evan Alexander, and he was adopted by his parents. His parents were doctors, but he said in his book that he always felt the need to find who his parents were.
No, that's pretty good.
It's quite a bit of a work that you both are quite involved in. What sort of how many people are working in this organization? Yeah, as you've explained, there is a lot of work involved in the background. And for every work that you do, you need money for that. You need funding for that. So where does your funding come from? Hello and welcome to Khaas with Sakshi and Shanaz. This is our very first English podcast and we hope you will love and support us as you've been doing over the past few months. Children are the future adults and so are the future of any society, community or country.
There are over 153 million children who do not get the environment that they deserve. Either they are abandoned or they're into orphanages or they need love and support from their family but they do not receive it. The more problem that we encounter is the family violence, the parents who are unstable to nurture their kids, and this is a core problem at the moment we face in New Zealand. Today we are here to address and discuss the problems that these children face within the safe environment from their families. Homes of Hope, based in Tauranga, Bay of Plenty, they look after these children for almost more than 2 decades now. Without me addressing all these background history and what do they do, let's welcome our special guest, Hilary Price, who is the CEO and founder of the organization Homes of Hope. She also has the practice manager who's joined us for this podcast today.
Hello, Hilary.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us. Whoops. Sorry.
That's good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. How's your morning been?
Busy on a Monday as normal.
Nice. So before we start going into much detail about what you do, can you just give us a bit of a brief history about the organization, or when it started, and why did you feel the need to start when you did?
The organisation was formed with a trust in 2002. Time passes. And it was in response to what came to our attention in regard to a child who was abandoned at an early childhood centre. And his mum had been coming for 6 weeks just with a plastic bag with his possessions, and one day she never collected him. And that was the beginning of a journey which opened our eyes to the fact that this was going on right under our noses in our neighbourhood. And little did we know, the more we found out, what the situation was in regard to vulnerable children and vulnerable families. And we felt initially, why isn't somebody doing something about it? And then we instantaneously became very convicted, why aren't we doing something about it? And that's how we started. And it's been a steep learning curve ever since, and we've learnt so much and continue to learn so much. And as part of that journey, we've learnt about what is needed to support children and families who are doing it really tough and need somebody alongside them for a season in their lives so that they can stabilise and go on to flourish and live life well.
Wow, that's incredible.
So when you started, it was just yourself, or did you have other people with you?
A colleague whose early childhood centre it was, where the child was abandoned, and she was aware that I was involved in establishing a home for squatter children in Cape Town, South Africa. And so off the back of that, she invited me to join her in this what are we going to do about it? So we set off on a journey very naively and as I say, learned an awful lot on the way. And it's just been a miracle every step of the way. We're a Christian organisation and we have a very strong faith, and I know that you do, and I just think it's so beautiful when we can come together under that banner and feel that aroha for others, and treat others as we would be treated ourselves, and do what we can in our sphere of influence.
Absolutely. No, I really like the way how you said treat others, how we treat ourselves. That starts with tiny humans. Is
Our
there
passion has always been that early intervention, to reach children as young as possible, in their families as young as possible, to actually stem the dysfunction, as it were, or the negative environment, as it were, and actually bring cohesion and understanding and relief from the trauma, because obviously the earlier the intervention, the more effective it is.
Absolutely.
We're also very passionate about keeping the siblings together,
Yes.
so that they're not separated when for a season they can't be at home, and also that they should not be moved from place to place or home to home while they're away from family. So making sure that it's just that family home, that same school, those same friends. So there's that consistency and predictability for them throughout their journey of healing,
That's
and then the return home.
Yeah, I was reading an article over there. It says when we talk about the kids who live in orphanage without having any family background, they struggle the most with their emotional balance because they have people coming and going all the time, or they're being placed in different environments, which basically the stigma becomes quite imbalanced because they don't have permanent people in life, permanent environment around them, which we usually have in our families.
Absolutely.
Like a traditional way of living.
Yes.
And that's where they struggle throughout their life, not only with their early intervention, but also with the relationships in the future.
Absolutely. 100%.
So before we get into the deeper issues, would you mind walking us through a typical day at Homes of Hope? What happens, and how do you have a new maybe child on board? If you don't mind sharing a little bit of background so that our viewers understand the history, how it works.
Where are the
please.
kids coming from? Where do you start that?
Yeah.
Karina?
So our referrals come solely from Oranga Tamariki, our Child State Protection Agency, and they can be either planned in advance, so they may know that children need a safe placement in maybe a month's time, or it can literally be a phone call, can you place these children this afternoon? So it can be that quick, or a bit more planned out. Where we can, we like to try and do it planned if possible, because then the kids can come for a visit, they can come for dinner, they can come for an overnight, so it takes some of that fear factor out for them. However, we're not going to turn around and say no to a kid that's potentially been left at school, or they've just uplifted them from home and they need somewhere safe and stable to be. So typically that's kind of how the referrals come in. And then from there, I look at what's the best match. So we have 2 homes at Homes of Hope, and I look at a lot of different dynamics to make sure that where possible, whichever home we're putting that child into is going to be the best fit for them. So for example, one of our homes at the moment has got our older boys in it, so I wouldn't be putting, a 3-4-year-old in there when these boys are sort of intermediate, last year of primary, intermediate and college age. It's sort of unfair to that child, as opposed to the other house where there are younger ones, so they have little playmates and that sort of thing. Typical day is just like family. So our kids get up in the morning, they have their breakfast, get ready for school, do their little morning routine chores that they might have. Off they go for their day, whether that's at daycare, school, kohanga reo, whatever that looks like for that child. Then they get home in the afternoon, just like you would at home, have afternoon tea, get out of their uniforms, do their little nightly chores, argue over who's feeding our cat, just like siblings do, and then go off to any activities they might have. So they might have rugby training, they might have gymnastics, they might have choir practice, depending on the child, depends on what they're involved in. And then, dinner time, homework, all your normal kind of family stuff, and then off to bed and start all again. And then, they at the moment they're on school holidays, so they're very excited that there's no school at the moment.
I'm sure. And a bit of a kiosk as well.
It's actually not too bad, these holidays. A lot of our children that have been with us for a while are in a transition plan at the moment to return to family, which is very exciting. So there's a few of them that are actually spending some quality time at their parents over this holiday break. So it's meant that we've got a few less than we normally would over the holidays, which is very strange for us. And we just actually farewelled a sibling group of 3 on Friday. They returned to their mum, and we've got another farewell tomorrow for another sibling group of 2 that are returning to whānau. So very exciting. So they're at the end of kind of that journey that we've walked with them, and now they're returning back with whānau in different ways. And then we'll start all over again with the next ones that come through. So exciting changes.
How long did they stay with you?
Totally dependent on the case. So the ones that just left us on Friday have been with us since October last year. So we worked out it was about 9 months by the time they came to us and then went back to their mum. And then the ones that are leaving tomorrow have been with us since December. But then we've got other tamariki that for various reasons they've been here 3-4 years. So we don't time frame in the sense that we're committed to being their last stop before they return to whānau or their forever home. So if that takes 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, we will hold them in that period and do that work that we need to do with the whānau to prepare them for that.
So you keep them in the same house with the same support worker?
So they have the same caregivers. Yep. So that
Mm.
stability, that consistency. Sometimes on the rare occasion, we might move kids from one house to the one next door because it's a better fit for them. Or, for example, we moved our end of primary school year child across to the other house because he was in with a lot of younger kids, and you can imagine that'd be really lame if you're 10, right? So in consultation with him, and we did it really planned, and we had a chat about the why and all of that, he moved across with the big boys, and he's living his best life now because there's not lots of annoying little children. So we look at that, and on the rare occasion we might move them, but because our houses are side by side, and because of the way, so our school run, it's not done in the sense of this house only takes the children from their home, this house only takes the children from their home. Because they're together, they split the school run. So all the kids have got connections to every caregiver anyway. So it's not really a big deal for them to move next door because they already know the caregivers really well.
Quite comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you say you've had farewell for family for 3 boys last Friday, isn't it? And they're going back to their whānau. So why would they come in the homes of hope at first instance? What's the main reason for them to be here when they're eventually going back to their families?
So it's what's called care and protection concerns. So Oranga Tamariki holds concerns for the safety and well-being of children, and they will remove them from their home environment, and then obviously they need to be placed somewhere while those issues are being resolved. Often we see a lot of our kids where I've been a social worker 18 years and I did 4 years in Oranga Tamariki when it was child, youth and family, and I'm now seeing generations that I dealt with as teenagers who have now had their children. So it's often intergenerational, and when you look back, the child we have here, their parents were in state care, their parents were in state care, and you can track it back multiple generations. So they come into care for a period, and then what should happen is that there's wraparound supports because you do the best you can with what you know, right? So if nobody's ever shown you a different way to do it, you're just going to do what you know. And no matter how much you might want to do it differently, if you're not armed with those skills, then how do you do that? So what we do is I do a lot of whānau support work. So I go in and just hang out with parents, have a chat, look at what's the core things we need to deal with first before we start doing parenting skills, because often it's they've got their own trauma that they've never worked through. So if I start teaching them parenting skills without addressing that first, they're not going to remember it.
Not at all.
So we deal with the core stuff first, and then once we get to a certain space, we're able to then go, okay, now let's teach you some skills to parent the way you want to parent.
So do you help in a way of therapy to the parents?
Yeah. So a lot of, I'm triple P parenting trained as well, and TFM trained and TBRI trained and all sorts of training over the last 18 years. So it's a lot of unpacking it, teaching people to understand their trauma. So one of the things I'm really passionate about is educating people about trauma and the impacts on our brain. Because what we know is if we scan your brain compared to someone that's experienced trauma, you can physically see a difference on a brain scan. So trauma actually physically changes the development of your brain. But what's really exciting with trauma, not the trauma part obviously, but what we know is that we can retrain the neural pathways so that it starts to interrupt the trauma receptors and gives you new ways of doing things. And so we can teach you how to self-regulate. We can teach you how to get out of fight, flight, freeze mode, all of that sort of thing. So I do a lot of educating parents around, you've had your own trauma history. Now you've got your child with a trauma history because of what's happened. So, and we do it with a hand model. So we talk about the way the brain works and that, this is your rational brain, this is your emotional brain, and this is your survival brain. And so because of their trauma history, their rational brain flicks off quicker than yours or mine would, then their emotional brain starts going, and at the same time their child's rational brain's doing this, so they're both doing this at each other, and then they hit survival mode. So a lot of that early day stuff I'm doing with parents is teaching them how to put that rational part of their brain back on, and talking to them about, that might be your child, and while you can look at that child and go, that's my child, because of a certain behaviour, it's actually a trigger for your trauma. So without you even realising, you're reacting to your child from a trauma response rather than from a normal parenting response. And when they start to understand that, they're able to literally stand there, because we do this with each other, literally stand there and go, where am I? Okay, my lid's starting to flip. I need to bring my lid back down. So it helps them to disrupt that natural reaction that happens in that moment. And then they start to feel success because they stay under control. Their children come down back into control a lot easier because they're not both going like this at each other. And so then they start to feel empowered. And once you see that in a parent, they start flying from that point on, because for the first time in their life, they feel like I can actually do something right and I can do something well and I can be the parent that I've always wanted to be because somebody's shown me and helped me to understand why my brain does things in that moment.
Yeah, you definitely talked about a lot of deeper stuff, whereas if I come from a very basic example connecting to our Asian communities, when there's a mother, like a new mother and a newborn in the house, there are so many traditional ways that have been followed from generational side of things, that their grandparents inside the house, they've been telling the mother, you should do this, you should do that, because that's the way how they have done things. Perhaps that might not work for the new mother or the kid because of the generations been changing as well. So that eventually turns out to become a traumatic level and stressful, where we see postnatal depression, so many problems behind it. But you've definitely touched something beforehand as well, where not even becoming a mother, but something when they were a child. So what I can say is you're not only working with the children to look after them, but also parallelly looking for the families so that they can eventually be connected together and live happily ever after, which is incredible. And I must congratulate you for that you're doing such an amazing job. And it does give us, quite, I'd say, and also the name of the organisation they've chosen, it does give us hope that if we could do our 10 cents through this podcast, and if whoever's listening to our to this podcast might come in and listen and then add some value towards this organisation in any what way, that would work really well for the kids, of course, and for the other side of the work that you do in the organisation. Moving forward to the next part, so when you talk about that you get kids over here, do you have a ratio and a certain number that you keep in the...
So we're contracted for 9. Okay. We very often don't have 9. We very often have more than 9. But for me, it's not... I hate numbers games. We're talking about children.
Absolutely.
And so for me, it's making sure that fit is right. Because what we don't want to do is just put a whole lot of kids into a house and then the dynamic's not great and there's incidents all the time and there's stuff happening all the time and we're actually adding to their trauma. So what we want to do is get that balance right where we can and look at what that looks like. Because we're committed to siblings too, it very much depends on the kind of sibling groups we get in, the referrals we get in that space, that sort of thing. So up until Friday we actually had 10 children living with us. Till the 3 went home, which is very exciting. And we'll be down to a lot less as of Tuesday. But I have no doubt that those spaces will fill up really, really quickly. But it's not so much a numbers thing for me. It's about, and not just the sibling group, but also the behaviours, that sort of thing. So some of our kids come with really high needs. So we'll go back to Oranga Tamariki and say, we don't want to put extra kids in with this child because it's going to do more damage than good to that child and potentially the children coming in. And so we'll negotiate with them about what that looks like, because obviously in those moments we might not meet our contract at 9. So I just go back and
that was my exact reason to ask about the numbers, because in New Zealand there's always a ratio for anything. Even if we put kids in our childhood centres, there's a ratio that one teacher can only have up to 9 kids. So that's where it's like, you can't really have it packed. You need to have that balance. So that's great that you said that, because that's exactly what I was hoping to hear.
And we want quality of care, not quantity.
Absolutely.
We want to make a difference in these kids' lives and their families' lives, so that they can break cycles and their children then don't ever have to know what Oranga Tamariki is unless they choose to work there one day. That they can break those cycles. So we want to make sure we're intentional in everything that we're doing.
And it's great that you're working with the siblings and the families, because not every organisation works with the siblings. Because as we were talking the other day, you said that some of the other organisations, they can only take one kid, and sometimes one kid is put into other part of the country, and these kids who've just been separated from their parents, then they get further separated from the siblings as well. It's quite traumatic for them.
Absolutely.
So how do these kids feel when they come here at first place?
So imagine yourself having to go to a place you've never been before with a bunch of people you've never seen before and being told that you are now going to live here. So you can imagine what that would feel like, right? And that's just as an adult. So imagine that when you've witnessed family violence, when you've experienced neglect or abuse and all of that stuff, and while we're safe, they don't know what safe is. So it's a completely foreign environment for them. So you can imagine how overwhelming that would feel being a child. Like, I know if I go away, I want to know who's picking me up from the airport, what's happening here, where am I staying? I want all those details before I just go away on a nice break somewhere.
Or you always want to know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some of our kids, it also means a change of school, change of kohanga. The friends that they used to have are no longer there. So there's a lot of dynamics to it. So you can imagine how overwhelming it is for our kids. We have a cat here called Hope. She is just beautiful. She's my best friend, and she is phenomenal. So she has this knack of finding the newbies, and she will go up, and usually because she's trying to scam food out of them, she's getting very fat, but she has this knack of going up and just weaving around them, and you just watch instantly that child just relax. So they might be fearful of the adults they don't know, because remember, adults have hurt them too. But this little furball that wants to convince her she hasn't been fed when she has been probably 5 times that day, just wrapping around, and then they'll pat her, and you just watch kids instantly just relax. And our kids that have been around a while are really good at going, come with me, I'll show you where the toilet is, I'll show you where your room is, and they kind of help the house parents do that, so that it's children their own age or similar age that are kind of bringing them in and welcoming them. And it's usually within a couple of days you see them start to really relax. Some kids quicker than others, some kids longer than others. But Hope is certainly a huge help for that. And she's just gorgeous. She's absolutely beautiful.
Do these kids get told what's going to happen to them when they get removed from their house?
They do and they don't. And if you can imagine, so you get removed from your home, how much are you going to take in after that? In that initial day, because you're in survival mode, right? You've been taken from everything, and we know that kids will always side with even the people that have abused them, because that's all they know, and that's their family. And so even though we can look at it from the outside and go, that's really awful, I can't believe you went through that, that sort of stuff, for them they don't know any different. So although it's not safe, that's all they know. So it can be very confronting for them to be in a place where they don't get yelled at, where they get spoken to nicely, where we teach them all the time kind words and kind hands. That's what we do here. We use kind words and kind hands. That's not kind. And retraining them in that way. can be really overwhelming and daunting for kids. So we're asking them to not just come to a new place, but we're asking them to learn a whole different way of being and living, and that can be really hard. So
What's the age bracket of these children?
we usually take 0 to 11. However, if they are older than that and they're part of a sibling group, we will take them as well, as long as there's no heightened behaviour that puts the younger children at risk. So we've got a couple, well, one now, because one just left on Friday, of college-age children. One of them's been with us since he was at primary school. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful young man, absolutely stunning. And they all know you're the tuakana, so you're the leader in Homes of Hope, so you need to lead by example to the younger ones, and he will tell them off like big brothers would, and he will be the first to say, we don't talk to our caregivers like that, we don't talk to Karina like that, with the newbies, and kind of, but he does it in a way that's not aggressive or anything like that. It's in that more leadership role. So as long as there's no running away, drug taking, that kind of stuff that would put the younger children at risk, then we're not going to turn around and say, sorry, you're too old, you have to be away from your siblings. We bring them in, and they become part of the leadership group and the children.
So what happens to the kids who are, at the age of 11? What happens afterwards?
So if they're with us, they stay with us until they go to their forever home or their family. Yeah.
Okay. So when you say forever home or the families, if they don't have you ever had that situation where the kids never got to live with their families back again, but haven't had the foster family either?
I haven't. Have you? No.
Good to hear that. That's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay.
We will always stand in the gap until there is a permanent solution for them.
Yeah,
that's our
great.
commitment.
Yeah, because there are certain communities out there, organisation who will stick to their age bars. That's it. We've had this policy in the books. We're just going to go by the books, and now we need to have another place. So that becomes, for the kid, it becomes like you're going to start from scratch again.
That's right.
Absolutely.
They've left the home once, and now it's twice, and then they become not even starting from the scratch, but becomes even more traumatic. Isn't it nice? So that's beautiful that it doesn't happen at Homes of Hope.
I think it's the sense of belonging that kids feel. Like I was just reading this book about this famous neurosurgeon, about his life. His name is Evan Alexander, and he was adopted by his parents. He was like, his parents were doctors, but he said in his book that he always felt the need to find who his parents were, because he kind of felt that he was not wanted. Why was he adopted? Did parents not want him? Even though he said, I had a beautiful life, but I always wanted to know that, and he did find out because, so I'm just coming back to hear that, he had a really nice childhood. He was very young, even at, when he had his own family, he had his own kids. Even until then, he always wanted to go back and find out the reason what happened. And he said it's a sense of belonging. And later he found out that no, it was for good reason that he was asked to be adopted. So coming back to these children, they're very young. And if they feel that, we're not wanted in this house, and if they keep moving, it's that sense of belonging that they're losing.
Absolutely.
Abandonment, rejection.
I think even as in like us as well as adults, we if somebody don't like us, we just can't take that fact. Oh my God, why don't they like us?
We tend to go back in our little cocoon that, we must have done something wrong. Or maybe we start blaming ourselves. Something's wrong with me, and this because everything starts from within. And we either blame ourselves or we either cherish ourselves. And when we are kids, imagine when I was a kid, if anything was not right in terms of my environment, I would first think about, have I done something wrong here? What created this environment in front of me? Or maybe if I do something better, the environment might change because we don't know how to self-regulate at that time. And that's where these kids are struggling at the moment because the environment that they're coming from, they don't teach them how to self-regulate because technically the parents don't even know them by themselves.
That's right.
So that's where the problem is. Do you see that in your children? Like, how in a typical house as parents, me being as a mother, I always pay attention to my daughter. Okay, what is she good at? Is she good in sports? Is she good in science, maths, studies, or art? Anything which brings light to her eyes. Then I try to put more emphasis on on that part of her life, that okay, let's get her into gymnastic or swimming, or let's take her out in the park so that she can play soccer. She's, by the way, a really good player. She loves soccer. Anything like that. So do you look after those needs in the house as well with the kids?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're about holistic care, not just band-aiding. One size fits all.
Yeah.
How do you know what's out there if you don't get exposed, right? Yeah. So we're looking for pro-social stuff we can expose our tamariki to all the time, because then they're around pro-social peers and they see a different way of being and they get to belong. One of our kids has never, ever, ever been a part of a team of anything before, has behavioural stuff, you name it, always kind of, he's only 6, always been in trouble, that sort of thing. We signed him up for rugby this year. The pride... He literally gets buckets of water with detergent in it and washes his rugby socks, because I've got to wash my rugby socks, Karina, I've got to wash my rugby socks. He doesn't have to do that, the caregiver will do it, but no, he's absolutely fixated on looking after these rugby socks, and then he'll spend about half an hour washing them by hand to hang them on the line, dripping, because he hasn't wrung them out or anything, because that's his pride and joy. Wow. And, you know, he got player of the day one weekend, which for a kid like him, he's never achieved anything. He's always been labelled as the bad kid, the naughty kid, the whatever. And, to see him growing in confidence and learn how to be a good member of a team and how to practice and how to persevere when things aren't going your way, and all of those skills is just beautiful. So that in itself is therapy, right? Therapy doesn't have to be in a room with someone with a pad and pen. In fact, we know that often doesn't work. It's getting them involved in that sort of stuff that is another layer of that healing and that helping, and teaching those normal social skills that we probably all got growing up that these kids didn't.
I think it's that purpose that they got now, right? It's just, it's amazing how one purpose can help you go in the right direction and forget about you, or not forget, but kind of help you heal your trauma.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. So you've talked about, you know, how these children come in and you work with them and with the parents. And when the right time comes, these children return back to their whānau.
Yeah.
Right. What happens when they don't get returned? So they go to the foster home. So how do you find the foster homes for them? So
that's Oranga Tamariki's job, to find the forever homes. Sometimes it might be a teacher at school that gets a soft spot for them, and so we might hear about that, and so that process might start. Other times it might be somebody that's down at the rugby field, or that sort of thing. So because they're connected into a community, we're looking at that bigger picture stuff, and if we feel there's somebody that would be good when they can't go back to whānau, then we'll put those people's names forward if they're interested, and start that. Oranga Tamariki starts that process. For predominantly our tamariki are Māori, so they will look wider. So they will go to the hapu, to the iwi, because there's got to be someone in there that is quality, right? And that keeps our kids linked into their tūranga waiwai, where they're from, their roots, all of that sort of stuff. So there's also that side of it that gets explored as well.
Are they that specific to make sure that they're in the same tribe, or they can't really have that kind of luxury?
They are that specific. That's what 7AA. That's why we're all up in arms at the moment about the government trying to remove 7AA, because 7AA holds social workers accountable that they need to check the kids' whānau, hapu and iwi first and foremost. And as somebody, I was adopted, so I'm Māori by birth. I whakapapa to my dad that adopted me's history, because I was the second generation adopted, and it was my birth mother's biological father that was Māori, and we cannot trace our biological line. So I know firsthand what it's like to grow up disconnected, and to try and claim that, and then to have my own children, and now my own moko, so my grandchild, and we're still trying to pull that back generations down the track. So I will fight to make sure social workers get it right in that respect, because it's not as easy as just ticking a box on a bit of paper. Like, it actually has long-term implications for those of us that were disconnected, and I will not let that happen on my watch.
I totally hear you on that one, because it's not only within the connection of feeling it disconnected, but also there's so many other things connected to it, like even the medical issues of within your family or within yourself, because we get so much from the family. We inherit, good health, bad health. How in our families, when we look at it, okay, I have this health issue because my grandmother was anemic. So she passed that to my mother. So biologically, I'm low in iron and immune system. So that's how I discuss things with my GP. And that's how they pick up a chart. Okay, you better get this diabetic check done in this time, or you've got this cholesterol issues, you've got this arthritis problem because it's in your family history. So a person, I totally hear you on that when you feel disconnected, not within your soul side of your life, but also physical side of your life. Because then, if you have a problem with your body in terms of any problem in your health issues, you can't trigger that. You can't fix it. You can't get the history of it, which creates problem. Obviously, isn't it? So that's quite. It's sad, to be honest. So what other things coming to my mind is, what's the difference between foster home and adoption?
So adoption's not, it's not a thing in this country anymore as far as national adoption. You can still go overseas and adopt children, but they moved away from adoption a number of years ago and then moved into what's called home for life. So it's similar to adoption. The difference is the day I was adopted, I was issued a brand new birth certificate with my parents that raised me's names on them, their details on it. My original birth certificate no longer existed. I think it's probably still in the archives if I really wanted to get it, but that was no longer my legal document. That birth certificate I was issued on the day of my adoption was legal. Now, what will happen is they will go home for life, and so they don't get issued a new birth certificate. Their birth certificate remains the same, and their parents still remain as guardians as well, so they become additional guardians. So they still have a say in things like religion, hair cutting, schooling, medical stuff, that sort of thing. So they still have to consult, whereas when my parents adopted me, that was it. Nobody had any other say.
Is it a good thing for the kids though?
Yes and no. It depends on the case. So in some cases it works beautifully, and so you had kind of this, like anything in life, they swing from one extreme to the other. So the problem that happened with all of us that were adopted, and I was a different case because of the kind of parents I had that raised me, is a lot of people who adopted children went no contact with the birth family ever. Whereas my parents did it very differently. They were what was called an open adoption. So they were always more than happy for our birth families to come and visit us. We stayed connected. My brother's Nana, we called her Nana Duck because we had so many nanas, and she had ducks, so she got the name Nana Duck.
That's how you named her.
Yeah, that's how we named her as children. It was like, oh, well, you've got ducks, you can be Nana Duck. But we grew up with a multi photo frame on our wall between our dining room, lounge and kitchen area that had photos of those of us that had met our birth families. I hadn't, but my siblings that had photos of them with their birth family. So it was never secret. I never found out I was adopted. I always knew. That was a very rare case. So most people, once they adopted children, they just completely banished all knowledge of the biological family, that sort of stuff, which is fine for them. However, from an adoptive person's perspective, you're going to go searching because one day you're going to find out you're adopted, right? I travelled through it a lot better than some people I knew that were also adopted because it wasn't this dirty secret in my family. It was actually something to be celebrated. We had a book on the shelf saying why was I adopted, and it was this beautiful story about how we were special because we were chosen, and so it was made this really beautiful thing. Whereas for a lot of kids that were adopted, and this country's got a really bad record in the way they did some adoptions, particularly back in the 60s, when, girls would get pregnant out of wedlock and they would get sent away. They were on holiday and they'd have their children removed immediately at birth and, all of that sort of thing. So they changed it so that the biological parents could still have some degree of ability to stay in contact with those children, whether that be supervised visits once a month or once every 6 months or whatever that looks like, because the child's rights in that and the way it used to be done were often forgotten. And like I say, I was blessed because my parents were really kind of ahead of their time, I guess, when they adopted us. And they understood the importance of us being able to know where we came from, that kind of thing, whereas it didn't work like that. So that's why they shifted away from adoption, because biological parents had zero rights the minute you were adopted, and moved more towards the home for life concept.
So home for life is up until the age of 18?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and then kids can go freely wherever they want to go?
Yeah.
Or
So
do they
it's
have
just
to go where
work-life
they
parenting.
Do
Yeah.
they have to go, or they can still just continue to live with the families?
They can still continue to live with families. It's just your normal kind of same thing you do with your own kids.
Like coming
Yeah.
back home from uni in the break and things like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Or in my oldest daughter's case, just not leaving till you're 22.
Have you had any?
Good for you too.
Have you had anyone who's reached up to that age and have still decided to keep coming back to the forever home? Like
Not
in the uni breaks?
Yeah, not with us, because we don't do forever homes at Homes of Hope.
We've had caregivers in the past who have gone to Home for Life, and those young adults now continue to live with them, and are also in one particular family have taken up apprenticeships with the dad, who's a plumber, and so they continue to live there and work together. In other cases, the girls I'm thinking of have gone to independent living, but are still connected. An ideal, I mean, our philosophy here at Homes of Hope, and for anyone who works with us or has worked with us, the understanding is, these are lifelong relationships, and we never want to not be available to continue that relationship, whatever form that might take. And so we have a lot of young adults now who continue to retain contact through things like Facebook and Instagram and Messenger, and we'll dip in. We've had them popping in to say hi, less so of late, but certainly in the past, and just to know that we are always here and our doors are always open, not to live with us here in this setting, but to remain connected, to refer to if they need advice about. Even some have returned and done support caregiving work for a while because they wanted to give back, so they've come and served here, and then in the future they've asked, okay, now can we have a reference? They're further down in the south of the North Island, or in Christchurch, or whatever. So it's looking at the whole, the life journey as a whole, as far as is practically possible.
That's pretty good.
It's quite a bit of a work that you both, are quite involved in. What sort of how many people are working in this organisation?
Right now, I think, I'm trying to remember since the last count.
I've got 8 full-time, not full-time, but 8 caregivers that do 4 on 4 off, and then 2 support caregivers, and then in the office we've got 3 of us.
14, and then it'll be 15 because we do student internships as well.
Okay.
And they come in a voluntary capacity, but it's part of their learning journey.
Is that for the social services program that they do?
Work.
Social work, yes.
And we have overseas students that also come and do internships.
Yes, I met one of them.
Usually those would be masters, social work qualifications. We've had counsellors as well who've worked here in certain capacities as part of their qualification journey. But where we sit right now, it's 14. Oh no, sorry, it's actually more than that, because we haven't talked about our child-centred play therapy practice and our therapy hub next door. So we have 3 therapists in that space as well. So that's 17 of us.
So when you say you've got child therapists, what is their core job?
That is solely working with children in a therapeutic space using the modality which is called child-centred play therapy. And this is an approach which uses the normal status operandi of tamariki, in that play is their language, toys are their words, and where a child's brain development is not has not yet reached age and stage where they can actually process verbally the experiences that they've had, the prefrontal cortex. I mean, we know that only fully develops at about the age of 25 is the most recent research. But through play, the children are able to work through their experiences in their time and their way, primarily, most importantly, with a safe, trusting professional person who is able to give that child unconditional positive regard, continual support and consistency as they journey through their therapeutic process. Trauma the child has been through, either through force feeding the babies or binding them up, tying them up and hiding them. We have certain spaces created in the playroom where the child can elect to either hide themselves or hide a toy or whatever the subject matter they're working with. So there are definitely expressions through their play. We tend to steer away from definitively interpreting symbolic play, but you can certainly see the themes, and there are 4 stages that every child goes through in this therapeutic model. And one of those stages is expressive or aggressive, and the other is regressive or nurturing. And so children who have been poorly attached, poorly cared for in the early years, they will revert to being a baby and wanting to be babied, and have an 8-year-old who's using a dummy and a bottle and wanting to be nurtured and cuddled. We have children who have what we call being parentified, who have had to take the role of being a responsible carer in the home because of the circumstances, usually to do with substance abuse, and so that 8 or 9-year-old has cared for the siblings. So then there's strong elements that we see in the play of them being that caregiver, taking, cooking lavish meals in the kitchen, changing babies' nappies, taking the baby to the doctor. We've had children symbolically paying when the mother has been a drug addict and a drug dealer. And this 8-year-old is very well versed with money, exchanging money, counting money, trading. No, the therapist will never investigate, they will never ask questions. They are simply there to let the child lead and support them as they journey through this. And the remarkable, wonderful thing is seeing how, by the time they finish their therapeutic process, what we see in their outer world, in their day-to-day, they're more able to self-regulate, they are better pro-socially behaviour, they move away from extreme behaviour, either aggressive or expressive. And the schools, we work closely with the schools, and they will report back how the child is more centred, more able to concentrate, because this child has actually been given the opportunity of dealing with their trauma in this child-friendly, focused way. No, I just am continually amazed at the miracle of this beautiful way of being with children and seeing that healing take place. It's just magical.
As you've explained, there is a lot of work involved in the background. And for every work that you do, you need money for that. You need funding for that. So where does your funding come from?
We receive about 50% of our operating costs from a contract with Oranga Tamariki, and we need to then fundraise for the balance. So that is a significant cost for us to raise, but we also relish that opportunity because part of our model is that it is very much a part of the community that we're in, and we just invite community support to actually evidence our societal commitment to the well-being of all children in our community. So philosophically, we love that model. It's also very practical that we're not just dependent on one funding source. It is scary. We get funds from grant bodies and foundations and philanthropic organisations, and we also get funds from faithful people who will give regularly. Anything, any amount is fantastic, and particularly if it is predictable. So if we know what we're going to be getting in from donations on a predictable level monthly, that helps us with our planning and our ability to do what we want to do and to continue to grow our service into the community. So that is it in a nutshell. And then alongside that, donations in kind. So we work with other agencies like Good Neighbour, who actually donate food to us once a week, and other organisations who have gifted us in-kind items like Stony Creek with the fleeces in winter, and beanies. We've got lovely retired ladies who knitted wear for winter. We've got lots of that. We've had a school that did a big fundraiser and donated a lot of winter pajamas for us, so we were able to share the love amongst our extended community in that regard. So practical helps in terms of hands-on, but less so. Practical helps in terms of material goods that we can use. But I have to say, practically, that regular donations or regular giving to help us ensure that we meet our costs is what we really work hard on a daily basis.
So do you have a fixed calendar for certain fundraisers throughout the year? Or do you plan it every year? Different sort of fundraising activities?
Yeah, we plan it different every year. We've tried over the years to have one regular big fundraiser.
And when would that be, if you don't mind me asking? Like one big one of the year, is it like, that you've got one big fundraising happening at this time of the year? Do you have that coming up, or has it already been passed by?
Not at the moment. We've just started talking about a community fundraiser that we'd like to do, and probably it'll be early next year, still in the summer, like a walkathon for families, but it'll have a different spin on your regular, everybody there at the same time doing the same thing. So we want to do it differently with a theme, walk in a child's shoes for 5Ks or whatever it might be. But everything's still in the conceptual phase at the moment. What we've found over the years is that as we've got busier and grown our services, we actually are very time poor to actually put into these sort of activities. And over more recent years, what we found is that other parties have come to us with ideas that they're willing to run with in terms of fundraising or fundraising event. And then that's been really successful, and we then get behind it as best we can. But we are very time poor in terms of leading out on a big event, as it were.
Because I'm sure there are like many generous people who would love to contribute to this organisation. It's just a matter of people to know that there is such organisation who's doing a wonderful job in helping these children, getting out of their traumas and helping them heal and getting back to their families. So I'm sure through this podcast we will have some people who would love to contribute. And as you said, any number is welcomed. It doesn't have to be big. It can be $20 a month, $25 a month,
even $5 a month.
Even $5 a month,
absolutely.
Because it's like for someone like me, I didn't know about this organisation a while back, but when I got to know that there is such organisation, obviously I wanted to do it, especially being a mother.
Thank you.
You know, our heart goes out to those children who have to suffer and have to go through this pattern in their life. That's, you know,
that's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is indeed heartbreaking. And I think whatever we could do, have our 10 cents worth.
Yeah.
It's going to make the whole...
Absolutely.
It's going to make someone's...
Just want to thank you so much for just coming and talking to us and taking the time to hear about our mahi and the work we're doing and work we're trying to do to support families. And I wish you really all the very best with your podcast. I think it's just wonderful, wonderful concept. And I can't wait to continue following you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. No, absolutely. Likewise, pleasure is definitely ours. We got this opportunity to talk about it, and I'm sure whoever's listening, they would probably, if they already knew about it, they would definitely encourage others to come forward to offer their support. And if they haven't heard anything about this before, and this is the first time ever that you're hearing about Homes of Hope, please come forward and make sure that whatever you could do in your best capacity, either it's providing support towards kids' education, their basic needs, their regular life food, groceries, monetary funding, if you could potentially donate something every month, every week, whatever's in your best capacity to serve the humanity is definitely welcome by Homes of Hope. It is our responsibility as a community to serve each other, to look after each other. Please make sure that you donate. That's how you live better, and that's how this world becomes a better place to live. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned. We will try our best to come up with more podcasts like this so that we can all work together towards the best purpose of this life. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe our channel. I'm the Khaas with Sakshi and Shahnaz, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.